This happened last fall, in the first week or two of October. I'm not really sure how to begin because it all came out of nowhere. It was a normal Monday afternoon. I finished work and pulled up to my house just after sunset. I usually park in the garage and go in from there, but as I drove up, I saw something hanging on the front door, so I parked in the driveway instead and went to check what it was. Taped right to the door handle was an envelope. I knew immediately it wasn't some random junk mail because my name was handwritten on the front. Inside was a short handwritten letter, and what it said made me really uneasy. The writer said they'd been interested in me and wanted to meet at a specific time and place the next day, which, oddly, was one of my days off, but I assumed it was just a coincidence. The note wasn't signed, so I had no idea who it came from, and there was no way I was going to meet a stranger. I went inside, tore the letter up, and threw it away, but it still bothered me that whoever sent it knew my name and address and claimed to be interested in me. I figured ripping up the letter might help me not worry too much, since there wasn't really anything I could do about it yet. Maybe it was just some dumb prank. I went on with my evening and got into bed a little before midnight. Like I said, I was off the next day, so I ended up sleeping in and spending almost the whole day at home. I don't even remember exactly what I did, but I know I made dinner pretty late, around 8 or 9, and then started getting ready for bed. I went upstairs, headed to the bedroom, and took a long shower to relax. But partway through, I suddenly heard the doorbell ring. I was confused who could be at my house that late, so I opened the shower curtain and listened for a minute. But when I heard nothing, I assumed whoever it was had left. I wouldn't have answered the door anyway, so I closed the curtain and kept showering. While standing under the water trying to relax, I started putting the letter from yesterday together with the strange doorbell, and the feeling that something was off kept growing stronger. Then I heard something else, a few light thuds or creaks right outside the shower curtain. I froze and listened, then quickly turned off the shower and pulled the curtain aside. No one was there. My heart was pounding as I got out, dried off, and put on clothes. The first thing I needed to do was check the front door. I slowly went downstairs and looked through the peephole, but there was no one outside. When I opened the door, a small slip of paper fell from the crack. Before picking it up, I looked around. The only sounds were the trees moving in the wind and crickets chirping. The whole neighborhood seemed dark and quiet, almost too quiet. I picked up the paper, shut the door, and unfolded it. It was written in the same handwriting as the note from yesterday. As I read, my chest tightened and my face went pale. The writer sounded angry about me missing the meetup earlier, like they truly expected me to show. At the end of the note, they signed with initials DN. This felt way more than a prank. It was personal and deeply unsettling. I had no idea what to do. The person was already gone, and even with those initials, I still didn't know who had left it. I paced around the living room for a while, a good minutes at least. Even then, as I moved about my own home, I kept getting this uneasy feeling that someone was watching me. I kept checking the windows and the door over and over, but never saw anything. Eventually, I knew I'd have to sleep. Overall, I decided that in the morning, I would go to the police station and take the letter to see what they had to say. I started heading upstairs. As I reached the top, I suddenly heard those thumping or creaking sounds, the same ones I'd heard while in the shower, coming from inside the bedroom. I hurried into the room. Nothing. Not a single thing in there to explain the noises. I'll admit the sounds themselves weren't alarming, but with everything else happening, they made me feel like every little noise could mean something, even though it probably was nothing. I closed and locked my bedroom door just to be safe, then checked the closet and every corner of the room to calm myself. Just before getting into bed, I remembered one more place I hadn't checked, a small balcony attached to the master bedroom that I rarely used. I kept the blinds closed most of the time and often forgot it was there. I walked over, pushed aside the blinds to reach the handle, and didn't even need to touch it to see it was already unlocked. There was no way I would have left it like that, but I didn't get the chance to open the door, because a moment later, a figure moved in the corner of the balcony outside. I stared at him in shock as he moved closer on the other side of the door, eyes fixed on me. I turned and sprinted out of the bedroom, hearing the balcony door open behind me. I ran to the nearest neighbor I knew would help, and by the time police arrived minutes later, they were searching the area. I was a wreck, terrified at the thought he might get away. And sadly, that's exactly what happened. They never found him. A few officers and I went over the timeline, and it became clear he must have broken in while I was in the shower. The noises I heard then were likely him opening and closing the balcony door where he hid. And since I'd heard those same sounds again while pacing, he must have come back inside at some point while I was downstairs. That makes the whole being watched feeling even more unsettling. Most unsettling of all was that in that brief moment when he looked at me, he seemed strangely familiar. Not someone I knew, just maybe someone I'd glimpsed before, maybe in a store or passing on the street. It drives me crazy that I can't place where or when I saw him. It could have been anything, which makes it far more disturbing that such a fleeting sighting was enough for him to follow me, fixate on me, and start stalking. A lot worse could have happened that night, and I'm just grateful I escaped, mostly unharmed. It's been nearly a year with no new notes or strange sounds, but I still find myself checking over my shoulder, wondering who might be watching. I was driving from LA all the way back to the East Coast. I had gone on the trip to visit a bunch of friends for a wedding and ended up staying for over a week. Since I stayed longer than planned, I only had 4 days to make it back home before my next shift at work. That meant I had to drive for really long hours. It was around 1 a.m., and my eyes were burning. My eyelids felt like they weighed 100 pounds. The only caffeine I had was an old coffee I picked up from a gas station 3 hours earlier, and by then, it wasn't even hot anymore. I was in the middle of nowhere, on what felt like a dead highway. There was nothing on either side, and almost no cars or trucks around. Every so often, a car would speed past me, only to disappear into the distance half a minute later. As I fought to keep my eyes open, I noticed headlights approaching from behind again. They weren't very bright, so it looked like an older car without those modern LED lights. The car was also moving much slower than the others. It took forever to catch up. After following me for a minute, it moved into the other lane as if to pass. I kept my focus on the road, making sure I stayed steady to let them by, but after a while they still hadn't passed, so I glanced left to see what was going on. The car was pacing me, matching my speed right beside me, some old, dusty, dark red vehicle with the window down. From what I could see, there was just one man behind the wheel, and he was staring straight at me. My window was up, so I'm not sure if he could actually see me through the reflections and darkness, but he was clearly looking right at my window as if he could. He didn't bother hiding it either. His interior light was on so I could see him clearly. He looked bloodshot and a little drunk from the way he moved, but he just kept pace beside me and stared. It freaked me out. I tried easing off the gas and he slowed down too. I slowed even more, and he matched my speed again. So I slowed to an absurd crawl, down to about 25 miles per hour on the highway, and at last he didn't mirror me. He kept going and disappeared down the road a minute later. I had no idea what to make of it. A creepy guy, drunk, or both. A few minutes later, I was struggling to stay awake again and knew I needed caffeine or a short break. So about 15 minutes down the road, I pulled into a tiny rest stop with just bathrooms and a coffee machine. No other cars in sight. I parked and went to the machine to grab a coffee, hoping it would help. By the time I had my cup and walked back to the car, another vehicle was pulling in nearby. I immediately recognized it as that same old red car from the highway. How the hell was he showing up behind me again? I never passed him, at least not that I remember. There was nowhere else to pull off either. He would have had to drive into the grass far off the highway and hide until I passed. Otherwise, I would have seen his car on the side of the road. I climbed into my car and glanced in the mirrors. He didn't park behind me. He slid right up beside me like he had on the highway. I could feel him watching me. It was impossible to ignore. I glanced over, and sure enough, he was staring straight at me with those unsettling red eyes. What on earth did this guy want? I started the engine, and he began yelling something, trying to get my attention through the window. I looked again, and he reached over, opened his passenger door, and motioned for me to get in. With that disturbingly friendly look on his face, I began to pull away, and when I glanced back one more time, his expression had instantly turned into a dead highway, but he followed me. He kept trying the same move, merging into the other lane and matching my speed. This time I wasn't having it. I started driving more aggressively to put distance between us. He matched that energy and got more aggressive too. I could have sworn he tried to pit me a few times, but I braked just in time before he could hit my car. Then, I spotted an emergency U-turn cut through to cross to the other side of the highway. In a risky, split-second choice, I took it before he could react and follow. Once I was safely on the opposite side and speeding away, I glanced in the mirror. My heart was still racing. For a second, his brake lights came on, but then he seemed to give up. His lights faded, and he drove off the other way. I was shaking for a while after that, so I pulled into a gas station and stayed there for about an hour to calm down and put some distance between me and that guy. While I was there, I sent in a tip to the police, mostly saying I thought he was just a drunk driver being reckless, but nothing really came of it. 4 days later, after I was already back home, I finally had time to relax and breathe. Out of curiosity, I looked up if the cops had caught any drunk drivers on that stretch of road, thinking maybe I'd see the guy's mugshot. But what I found was way more disturbing than I could have ever expected. The day before I left LA, someone had gone missing on that same road. Their car was found in the grass, but the person was just gone without a trace. The only lead came from another driver who said they saw a rusty red car driving erratically around the vehicle that was later found abandoned. Reading the whole case felt almost like déjà vu. It matched what I went through that night, except I got out okay. If things had gone differently, that night could have turned into something truly awful, and I might have ended up missing too. This happened when I was 17 years old. I used to go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week and would usually ride the bus home afterward. One Sunday, I had just missed my bus and realized I would have to wait longer for the next one. I thought about calling my parents, but they were out for the evening and taking a taxi cost too much, so I decided to sit in the bus shelter and wait. It was a cold night, and snow had just started to lightly cover the ground. My bus was taking much longer than usual, so I pulled out my phone and listened to music. Almost an hour had gone by. I was freezing, and the street was completely empty. I hadn't seen a single person until something caught my eye. A man, bundled in heavy layers of clothing, was slowly walking toward me. He looked unsettling. I knew that if I stared at him, it would only draw his attention, so I kept my focus on my phone. He sat down on the far side of the shelter, but didn't stop staring at me. Something about him felt wrong. He looked like he might have been drunk or high on something. After a moment, he asked, "When is the bus due?" I slipped out my earphones and replied, "I think it's delayed because of the snow." He kept staring at me for a while, then began mumbling to himself. My nerves grew worse, so I pretended to be busy on my phone again. A few minutes later, I glanced over. He had moved closer. I looked away for a second and then heard the sound of him sliding even nearer. I turned to him and asked, "You okay there?" His glassy eyes locked on me as he lifted his arm and leaned toward me. Instinct took over. I grabbed my bag and bolted as he collapsed to the ground. I sprinted down the road, forcing myself not to look back until I reached the next bus stop. When I finally turned, he was gone. Relieved, I sat down and leaned against the glass, waiting for the bus. That's when I heard it. Knock, 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 knock. My heart jumped as I turned around. He was there, staring at me through the glass. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, but he began walking around the shelter toward me. "I'm warning you. Stay back," I yelled, backing away in panic. I wanted to run, but my bag was still inside the shelter. I couldn't just leave it. Suddenly, he lunged at me. I dodged quickly, and he crashed face first into the ground. I froze for a moment, shocked, then noticed blood running from his face. I tried to get a response out of him, but he didn't answer. I immediately called the police and paramedics, who arrived not long after. When I explained what had happened, they told me the man was on prescription drugs. They found a photo in his wallet of him with his son. The boy looked almost exactly like me. They believed he had mistaken me for his child. Later, I learned that he had lost custody of his son and spiraled out of control after that. He was taken away for treatment, and that was the last time I ever saw him. Not long after, I got my driver's license, and I haven't taken a bus since.